Okay, we're going to get started. So welcome everyone to CareerCon's Fireside Chat with Dr. Fei-Fei Li. And today's chat is moderated by Kaggle CEO Anthony Goldboom, who is in the room with me. Dr. Fei-Fei Li is currently the chief scientist at Google Cloud AI. She's also a professor of computer science at Stanford University and the director of the Stanford Artificial Intelligence Lab. She's authored nearly 200 scientific articles. Among her best-known work is the Imagenet project, which has revolutionized the field of large-scale visual recognition and deep learning. So without further ado, I'm going to hand it over to Dr. Fei-Fei Li and Anthony Goldboom.
All right, thanks very much, Anna, and thanks everyone for joining. So it's a great honor to be interviewing Fei-Fei today. So a lot of you who are tuning in are relatively new to the field, and so you know, may not be aware of the background here, but Fei-Fei is one of a very small number of people who powered the new techniques that are behind the current AI revolution. Fei-Fei is most famous for creating Imagenet, which is a huge data set made available to researchers and really allowed researchers to start trying deeper neural networks, and also gave a standard benchmark that researchers could use to measure their performance against other researchers. So Imagenet directly led to the discovery of deep learning, which has caused a big step change in machine learning and what machine learning is capable of. So it's very exciting to be speaking to Fei-Fei today, because without Fei-Fei's work, many of us wouldn't be working in this exciting new field. Now, this conference is, of course, dedicated to learning more about how to get started in a data science and machine learning career. And Fei-Fei has an unbelievable career story. She was an immigrant from China, didn't speak a word of English when she came to the US as 16. As I understand it, Fei-Fei's first job in the US was actually cleaning houses, and now she works right up at the cutting edge of machine learning and AI. Without further ado, I want to get into learning a bit more about Fei-Fei's career, getting some advice from Fei-Fei on this exciting new field, and then we'll take some questions from the community. So Fei-Fei, thanks very much for speaking to me today.
No, this is a pleasure, Anthony. First of all, I'm a huge fan of Kaggle's work. So when you, Anna, and the Kaggle team invited me, I thought this is going to be fun, and just always a pleasure to talk to you, Anthony.
Yeah, likewise. So let's start at the very beginning. You were born in Chengdu in China. Can you tell us a little bit about your childhood and your early school experience?
I was actually born in Beijing, and then I grew up in Chengdu, China. It's just a small city of more than 10 million people, and it was I grew up in the 80s in China, when China was opening the door to the West, and I was lucky to have a pair of parents who loved learning. My dad loved nature, and my mom is very much into literature. So I had a good childhood in terms of growing up with books, and I moved to the States when I was 16, which life did change dramatically since then.
I can imagine. In your early schooling, what was your favorite subject?
That was an interesting question. So the standard answer would have been math. I don't recall it was math. So I think most memorable subject was physics, but that was around middle school. Probably before that was Chinese, actually. I loved language, but physics was really what caught my imagination, and it was just these deep questions of where we come from, what is the universe, where we're going. That was fun for me.
And so you discovered physics at school in China. Then your family, as you said, moved to the US when you were 16. What was the trigger that made the family move?
That is a great question, and we have to interview my mom for that. I don't know the answer. I was too young to fully comprehend what's going on. It was, I moved with my parents.
And you were, when you arrived, you had pretty limited English, and in 2 years, you managed to go from learning a new culture, learning a new language, to an almost a full scholarship at Princeton. Can you talk about that? Like, what was the process of adjusting to life in the US and high school in the US?
So I landed in Parsippany, New Jersey. I don't know if there's anyone out there dialing from Parsippany, New Jersey. I heard it's cold over there today. And it was a small town. Actually, it was a town of already during the mid-90s, a town of immigrants. And I went to Parsippany High School. I was very lucky that the teacher, it's a modest high school, public high school, but the teachers are phenomenally kind. I remember my math teacher, Bob Sabella, we kind of ran out of course for me kind of early, and he used his lunch break to do advanced AP calculus for me. And, art teachers, science teachers, they were just kind. And it was a time that I was focused on learning. In a way, I feel I was lucky because I didn't have much distraction. There was no internet for me, so I was able to focus on learning the language, learning some of the new subjects, and also surviving as an immigrant, hence various sorts of jobs. And I think I was also lucky Princeton gave me an offer. I don't recall having a phenomenal SAT score really. I remember my verbal score was pretty bad, but luckily Princeton still took me in.
And I suspect they don't regret it.
We'll see.
So you studied undergraduate physics at Princeton. Why? You mentioned that early in life, the first subject you fell in love with was physics. What was it about physics that grabbed you?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's the cosmic wonder that grabs me. I think early on as a child, there's a part of me that was precocious, that I love the philosophical ponderings of really the universe, meaning of life. Where are we going? Where did we come from? And physics to me is the epitome of the science that touches on these cosmic wonders. And Princeton, of all places, is where Einstein was. It's Feynman was there, and these deep questions. It was just fascinating, and I was lucky enough to be good at math, I guess, and it was a mecca for me. But it was also interesting that I kept a leg in engineering. Princeton doesn't have minors; they call it certificates, but it's just like minors. I did get a minor in engineering physics because that got me started to be exposed to engineering and computer science.
So you did some software as part of the engineering.
Yeah.
So after you finished at Princeton, you probably, like a lot of Princeton students, you had companies like McKinsey and Goldman Sachs, very elite employers who were interested in you. And as a new immigrant, this would have been a way to establish yourself very quickly. I assume turning those offers down was a hard decision. Well, was it a hard decision? And what was behind that decision?
It wasn't hard, actually, Anthony. I think part of it is I think that I'm lucky that I didn't, I kind of, since early on, just pursue passion more than some more practical concerns. So on one hand, I think it's important to fulfill my responsibility. And you were mentioning, I did run a dry cleaner shop at that time. Actually, I opened a dry cleaner shop. You're CEO of Kaggle. I was CEO of a dry cleaners. So, and that was helpful for surviving as a family with my parents. So that was part of my responsibility that I had to, it was important for me. But in the meantime, I want to pursue dreams as well. So turning down Wall Street was not hard. It was actually harder to switch out of physics and pursue AI and neuroscience because I loved physics. But one thing that got me thinking was that as I not only study the mechanics, electrical, all the electrodynamics and all those quantum physics, I also read essays by physicists like Schrodinger, like Einstein, like Roger Penrose. And it was curious that for these giants in physics, towards the end of their lives, they ponder about life more than the universe. They talk about life more than the universe. So that got me fascinated by another deeply cosmic question, is the question of life. And then, being influenced by philosophers, including people like Descartes, I think, therefore I am. To me, the essence of life has a lot to do with intelligence. And so I become very fascinated by neuroscience. And I also went to Berkeley during a sophomore year intern to do a neuroscience experiment and replicated Hubel and Wiesel and those neuroscience experiment. And that really got me a path to want to know more about brain and making artificial intelligence systems.
So I feel like we've got our first life lesson here, which is that sometimes in the long term you can be better off following your passion than following the short term most lucrative. No, it's a nice nugget. So it sounds like you had some exposure to neuroscience. Was Berkeley your first exposure to neuroscience, or had you done some of it at Princeton? Where did you when you went to Caltech, you did AI and computational neuroscience, as you said, but where did the interest first come from?
Yeah, so actually, as a college student, so if there's any college student out there, use your summers wisely. My freshman summer was a molecular biology internship in Rutgers University in New Jersey, and I got exposed to genomics and those. It was fascinating. It's part of life science as well, but just like I am very bad at cooking till this day, I'm very bad at hands-on experiment. So I learned that wasn't my strength. So the second summer I explored more system neuroscience, which is less molecular experiments. And I was fascinated by that. But I also learned, there is these stages of introspection that I want to be doing things at the cross-section of computer science, mathematical science, and intelligence, not just purely on the biology side. So that got me to decide to pursue artificial intelligence and cognitive neuroscience at Caltech.
Got it. Well, very good. And I think there's another good piece of advice in there, which is use your summer wisely, right? How often do you get a chance to experiment with different career paths and try new things out? You can do it for free during summer vacations. Yeah. When did you start working on Imagenet, and where did that idea come from?
That's Imagenet came post PhD time. So my PhD time was in today's world, prehistoric time of, AI and computer vision, even though it was just, I started 2000, so it was 18 years ago. And already we were asking some of the key questions in AI and computer vision in the subfield, which is, how do we recognize objects and describe objects? Today, you open a Google Photo app, it tags objects for you. But at that time, that technology not only wasn't there, that problem wasn't even formulated well. And it was also a lucky time that machine learning was starting to, to take on form as a subfield of AI. And the marriage between machine learning and computer vision became very powerful. So I was among the first generation of PhD students who was able to use the modern tool of machine learning and explore questions that are hard to answer, like getting a computer to see objects. So that was all good. And I became an assistant professor. First job was University of Illinois, Urbana-Champaign. But quickly, my alma mater, Princeton, called me back, not to the physics department, but a few buildings down to the CS department. And it was funny because that was the time I was deeply thinking about machine learning modeling, about object recognition. And I was doing a campus visit. I didn't even start my Princeton job yet. I was doing a campus visit. And I talked to a linguist, a cognitive scientist, Christiane Falben. And she showed me a piece of work called WordNet by another linguist called George Miller. And that was a knowledge ontology that organized the entire English language. And it was a cognitive science work. And I had some training in cognitive science to really appreciate and admire that piece of work. And then she was saying, you know, it would be nice to show a picture next to each of these words in English. And that moment really was a bit of a epiphany moment for me. I was thinking, showing one picture doesn't solve the problem. The world is big. The world is continuously, there's a lot of data. Babies get to exposed to a lot of data and the continuous seeing of the world. And machine learning algorithm at that time was struggling with, you know, as always, generalization issues, because we don't have the right amount of data. Our parameters are being overfitted, and everybody's trying to think about clever tricks to get over this overfitting problem to try to generalize. And suddenly I thought, wow, if we can just rethink about computer vision, rethink about object recognition from the point of view of giving huge amount of data to machine learning algorithm, that would really open a new way of thinking about how to model our visual world, how to represent our visual world. So we started, because of WordNet, we called our project Imagenet, and that was end of 2006, beginning of 2007, we began that crazy project, wanting to collect a huge data set of images for each concept in WordNet. And there are tens of thousands of concepts in WordNet.
And people did think it was crazy, right? My understanding is that the computer science discipline was quite hostile to the idea that someone could spend their research time collecting images and classifying images. Is that correct?
Well, I think the people who really thought it was crazy was my graduate students, because they're the ones with me suffering day to day on that. We had several failures. The first time we wanted to do it by hiring undergrads at Princeton, and they clearly had better things to do than
to do data labeling.
Yes. And it was just not scalable, because we were thinking about, we downloaded billions and billions of images. And then we thought of using current machine learning algorithm. And we spent month after month developing very fancy machine learning algorithm. Some of the milestones even became research papers themselves. But at the end of the day, it was just philosophically the wrong thing to do, because if we use machines to collect data for us, then the data's best case scenario was what the machines could do at that time. But what we wanted to do was to improve machine learning and to give a benchmark gold standard for machine learning algorithms. So one day we heard literally in the hallway again from a master's student who actually just graduated from Stanford, came to Princeton, and he said, "Have you heard of Amazon Mechanical Turk?" And I was like, "No, what is it?" And then he showed me, I still remember it was a project of naming colors, a very, very early crowdsourcing project. It wasn't nothing to do with Imagenet. And I saw that interface, user interface of Amazon Mechanical Turk online market. And that day we knew we found the path to Imagenet.
And you were the biggest customer of Mechanical Turk for a period, right?
I know.
I want to, so I'm going to skip ahead a little bit because we're running out of time and I want to get to the advice section. But from Princeton, you went to Stanford and now you split your time between Stanford and Google Cloud. How do you split your time? What's you've got 1 foot in academia and 1 foot in industry. What does that split look like?
So I'm on sabbatical from Stanford and I spend 4 days a week at Google Cloud working with amazing people like you, Anthony. And I still spend a day at Stanford, especially focusing on my students and their research.
So that segues nicely into a lot of people in our audience will be thinking a lot about academia versus industry, and you have experience at the top of academia and at the top of industry. Do you have advice for people on who are trying to decide between the two? Is there a certain character, is there a certain personality type that might be more suited to academia or more suited towards industry?
I absolutely don't think there's a certain personality type. We have a whole wide range of people and wonderful creative people on both sides. I think that, first of all, I think it's worth exploring especially for young people out there. It's hard to imagine your first job, your first degree, your first anything is going to determine the rest of your life, right? So give yourself that freedom to explore. So why would you want to get a PhD in academia? There's several reasons. There are people who want to be professors, and I probably belong to that camp. I saw myself as a professor, so that was easy for me. But another part of me, and for many of my students, is that you want to dive deep, because PhD is about devoting 4 to 5 to 6 years, going extremely deep and expand human knowledge to a place that no one else has done that. And you have to do something original, challenging, and give back to the world something new in terms of knowledge discovery or a new algorithm or something. But it's also for those who want to spend that time to go so deep in for 5 years. Industry, on the other hand, I think it's equally awesome here at Google Cloud, just coming to work every day, thinking about we are democratizing AI. We are taking the biggest computing platform humanity has ever invented, which is cloud, and deliver such a powerful technology, AI, onto this platform so that it can reach to our hundreds of thousands of customers, and they in turn reach to billions of users. That thought is also very empowering, and being part of that is also empowering. So there are all kinds of different choices for academia versus industry.
One of the very popular questions, we asked our community what questions they wanted to ask you. One of the very popular questions was, do you feel like if your ultimate goal is to get a job at an elite employer, Google Cloud AI or Google Brain or DeepMind, do you think a PhD is necessary or an important prerequisite, or are there other paths into those elite employers?
There's absolutely other paths. I think, Anthony, by being a successful entrepreneur, that's also another path. And many of the amazing people I meet at Google doesn't have a PhD. I think in AI, especially in AI R&D, a PhD is a very good path, because AI is a very deep technology and there's a lot of new things to do. And Stanford and other universities has phenomenal programs. So I think in AI R&D and especially research part, I think it's a very fun, path for young people.
Yeah, and I agree, based on my experience of being at Google. You were ahead of the curve. You focused on computer vision at a time where, as you said in your New York Times op-ed, we could barely detect sharp edges in photographs. So somebody starting their career out today, what are the things that are ahead of the curve today? What should people be working on if they want to be the next Fei-Fei Li?
Well, it's very hard to predict the future. When I wanted to do computer vision, I wasn't thinking to be ahead of the curve. I was thinking about two things. One is I'm fascinated by this topic of intelligence and making machines intelligent. And I think also I believed in some of the potential impact of intelligent machines to the world. So in a way, I think for young people choosing their career, thinking ahead about impact probably is a good, important ingredient. I'm sure when you start at Kaggle, you are thinking about the impact a successful company like Kaggle would have to the data science community and democratizing AI. So that was part of the consideration.
Yeah, the advice to follow your passion really resonated with me. Last question from me. And this is a bit of a different take on the careers question, but in your recent New York Times op-ed, I think it was published last week, you talked about human-centered AI, and you referenced the looming threat of job displacement caused by AI. Do you have any guidance for people entering the field? How do we make sure that we harness the good bits of AI without causing large-scale social upheaval?
Yeah, so that's a very important topic for all of us. As I said, and I'm quoting contemporary philosopher Shannon Whaler on this, there is no independent machine values. Machine values are human values. Humanity has never created a technology that resembles ourselves as much as AI. And as we develop AI, it'll be more and more so. So I think it's our opportunity to use AI in the best way possible. It's also our responsibility to consider the social and humanistic impact of AI. Job displacement is one of them. Fairness, safety, privacy, and many other issues are critical to AI. So from this point of view, I actually think AI has entered an age that we need a much wider set of talents, not just software engineers who can do AI algorithms. We need AI policy thinkers. We need social scientists. We need humanists. We need legal scholars. We need ethicists to work on AI from all different aspects.
Thanks, Fei-Fei. And very last question, this comes from our community. I'm willing to do anything to be Fei-Fei's PhD student. What does Fei-Fei look for in a candidate to be her PhD student?
So first of all, there's no Fei-Fei's PhD student. There's Stanford's Computer Science Department's PhD student. And your application has to go through a very rigorous committee, multi-stage, multi-professor review. And I don't know if I can speak on behalf of Stanford's Computer Science Department, but we definitely look for students who are authentically passionate about the computer science area you want to study, who are good students. In AI, good math skills matter, good coding skill matter, research experience, demonstrated research experience matter. Being a Kaggle winner is definitely a plus. So some of the criteria are spelled out on the Stanford Computer Science website.
Thank you, Fei-Fei. This was fabulous.
Thank you, Anthony.